Part 6. Infinite Doomsday Start Draws Luodu Mechanic. Author, Shanmao Aichiji. Chapter 51. Although his smile was uglier than crying, Tia seemed to be aware of his complicated mood, so she nodded hurriedly. Well, there are strange larvae being fed there, and there should be fresh seeds. With just one sentence, Lugger's brain immediately started working at high speed, summarizing and comparing the relevant information previously obtained, and the results were quickly obtained. It sounds like even Gaime eats the fungus carpet in stages. The larvae that need to grow their bodies eat fresh bacteria carpet that only transfers nutrients. Searched can on Google. When they grow up and need to strengthen their combat power, they have to eat mature creeps containing or raw materials. For example, the guns of the previous Vulcan cannon spiders may have been dug out of the remains of military vehicles, but the hard shell armor plates on them were probably obtained this way. Lugger thought about it and found that so far, the charms are still sticking to the bottom line of conservation of mass and energy. The creep settings are more reasonable. The conservation of quality and energy in all evil. Luodu wanted to realize in a blink of an eye that none of what he had seen before was true. People don't eat creep, not even Nephilim. However, as clues kept coming together, the matter became more and more solid. The last bit of luck in Lugger's heart was still stubborn, and things in reality still had to be done. Now that the direction of the final goal was confirmed, the two naturally took action quickly. The straight line distance from the overlooking hills to the fungus carpet may only be 2 or 3 kilometers, but the road is rugged and the journey seems very long. Coupled with the need to avoid two types of patrolling monsters flying in the sky and running on the ground, the two of them seemed to be back when they were sneaking into an evil cave. At this time, Lao Now, who was supposed to be the trump card of the two people, and had been here before, was no longer Now at all. It's not that it can't recall the past memories at all, it's just that after 20 years of changes, those memories are basically useless. It said that although the area here has not changed much, it is still the same area, but the ceiling is countless times higher. As Tia walked away, she relayed Lao Naokeo's words to Lugger. In short, it seems that 20 years ago this place was just a natural underground cave accidentally connected to the sewer network. Formation cracks similar to underground riverbeds. Although it has been artificially widened, it is far from the vast underground city it is now. The landscape has changed so much that even if Lao Naokeo could recall all his experiences 20 years ago, it would not be of much help to the two of them. The two people who were asked to follow the flying mobile phone to rush here to avoid wandering around in the intricate maze seemed to be the pinnacle of its achievements. After listening to Tia's narration, Luodu felt like vomiting. However, the energy of complaining has just been used up by the creep, and he is now a little numb to these things. So he just nodded and continued to carry HK-417 forward. At the bottom of the dimly lit dungeon, the two men used their shadow cloaks to move forward through the gaps in the landscape. After walking around for an hour, the two finally arrived near the fungus blanket. Lugger felt even more horrified when he saw the fungus blanket that looked like purple-red beef sauce at a close distance. That thing actually seems like a living thing, and it can tremble slightly like breathing. Oh, it seems that from the perspective of fungi, it is a living thing. Shaking his head and throwing away the yes and no, Lugger turned to ask Tia, "What should we do now?" "I'll lure away these mysterious larvae for you, and you go get the seeds. They are said to be larvae, but when viewed up close, there is not much difference in appearance between these monsters and their complete bodies. It is not the larval stage during insect metamorphosis. The biggest difference between them and mature humans is their body shape. For example, the machine gun crabs and Vulcan spider larvae that Lugger had killed before were larger than its honey badger tank, and they were all here. But their size is that the largest one is about the same as a cow, and the smallest one is even as big as a teddy bear. The enemies are just little guys like this, so Luodu dares to help Tia lure them away. If he faced those big guys with complete bodies, he would have to ask Tia to teach him how to dig seeds. No, you can't disturb them. Tia shook her head. These things go into a state of stress when they're attacked. They seem to emit some special chemical substances as signals, and the fungi will begin to transport mineral raw materials after receiving the signal. After absorbing mineral raw materials, these guys' shells will quickly harden and thicken, their claws will become longer and sharper, and they will enter a fighting state. You mean that when they encounter danger, they will quickly grow into mature bodies? Ruger asked. Almost. Tia nodded and shook her head, but the body is still so big, and it will become a mature body in form. That's not the point. The point is that this way, the carpet will be poisonous and there will be no way to extract fresh seeds. Understood. Ruger nodded. This matter is similar to the conclusion he came to through his previous summary and analysis. The fungus carpet is in sync with the hatchlings and mature bodies of the charming ones. The creeper is ripened by external threats, and the fungus carpet has to mature quickly, transporting toxic substances and becoming toxic to humans. Well. With a final sigh in his heart, Luger decided to give up on luck and accept his fate. Isn't it that humans in this world only survive by eating fungi? What's unacceptable? Is there any essential difference between eating fungal mats and eating mushrooms and fungus? Why do you care so much? If you really want to say it, the ancestors of the Nephilim are the hybrids of angels and demons. Demon hybrids, that's half demon, isn't it more unacceptable than fungal mats? Speaking of which, it seems that it's more natural for demons to eat fungal mats. Okay, that's it. After giving himself a final set of psychological preparation, Ruger decided not to dwell on this matter anymore and turned to ask Tia what to do next. Look over there, do you see that bulge that looks like a well? Tia pointed to a purple-red bulge in the center of the fungal mat. That's our destination. Although he had just promised himself not to dwell on it, Ruger almost couldn't hold it back after listening to Tia's explanation. He originally thought that the so-called fresh seeds were just a delicate part of the fungal mat, not a physical entity. Now I know that there really is such a thing. It's similar to the spores of fungi, but visible to the naked eye. However, the way this thing works in the fungal blanket is really unbearable. It feels like the well-shaped protrusion is like the reproductive organs of female mammals. Fresh seeds are like reproductive cells that grow regularly. The well grows seeds regularly, and then transmits them to the border through the transmission system on the fungal blanket. It takes root there and expands the territory of the fungal blanket outward. It sounds like there is nothing wrong with this, but if you use the human method to rearrange this model, you will know how weird it is. Suppressing his psychological discomfort, Ruger quickly nodded, indicating that he was ready. Then, Luigi, be careful, follow me. Infinite Doomsday Start draws Luodu Mechanic. Author, Shanmao Aichiji. Chapter 52. Earthworms, giant ants, caterpillars, crabs, spiders, strange-tailed snakes, mantises, grasshoppers, mole turtles, centipedes, scorpions, hard beetles. All kinds of miniaturized ghosts that Ruger had seen and not seen were spread all over the ground. It sounds simple to walk quietly from among these things to the center of the fungus blanket, but it is quite difficult to do. Ruger was very curious about how Tia's parents picked the seeds. He and Tia both knew how to use the magic shadow cloak. As long as they were not impatient and slowly looked for opportunities, they would always succeed. But what about others? But soon he found that those little ghosts were only concerned with eating and did not look up at people at all. In addition, the numerous companions around them were also constantly squirming, and they seemed to automatically filter out mild abnormalities. If this was the case, it seemed that neither of them needed to use the magic shadow cloak, just be careful not to step on them. But when a team of patrol bees flew over the fungus blanket, he reacted. It turns out that the magic shadow cloak is prepared for the patrols. If there is no magic shadow cloak, they have to determine the round-trip time of the patrols first and take action during the patrol intervals. It seems that it is better to have more skills. More skills are better and the tolerance rate is higher. After walking on the extremely uncomfortable fungus mat for another half an hour, the two of them crossed a distance of less than 100 meters and moved to the well. Taya, who had been calm all the time, also took a deep breath at this time, and was obviously not as calm as she looked. "Brother Lu, get ready." "Okay." Hearing Ruger's answer, Taya immediately drew out the fist sword and chopped it down at a position diagonally below the well. The strengthened sword blade immediately cut the fungus meat, revealing the red meat beads as big as quail eggs buried inside. Ruger took a bottle and swept it in, and collected several red meat beads. Done, Ruger sealed the bottle cap and shouted in a deep voice. "Okay, retreat." Tia immediately turned around and ran out of the fungus blanket. As soon as the two ran a few steps, the color of the ghost larvae next to the well quickly darkened, and rushed towards the two with their fangs and claws. It turned out that even the threat to the fungus blanket would trigger the early maturity mechanism of the ghost larvae. "Don't fight, run." Ruger was about to turn back to kill the pursuers to make some money, when he heard Tia shouting in front of him. He looked again and saw that the ghost larvae on the fungus blanket were maturing rapidly from the inside to the outside in circles and layers. It looked like the two had not run out of the fungus blanket before the larvae would all mature. If he wasted even a little more time, the two would be surrounded by these small ghosts who had gained combat power. These things are not big in size, and their defense should not be too high. However, their small size will only make their claws smaller, but the material will not change much. In short, their attack distance and range may become smaller, but their attack power is probably not low. Coupled with this despairing number, if they are surrounded, they may not be able to survive. Or, take out the chariot. As soon as Lugger had this idea, he was killed by himself. No, there is no time at all. Let alone starting the chariot, he may not have enough time to climb into the cabin. Then there is only the simplest and most basic way. Keep running. Run for your life. For a moment, Lugger felt that he had taken out all the strength he had in participating in sports competitions throughout his life. His instant burst of speed even allowed him to briefly surpass Tia. Just for a moment. "Ha, Luge, you run fast." As Tia exclaimed in surprise, the bomb girl also increased her speed and immediately rushed in front of Lugger. Nephi Tien is Nephi Tien. She ran so slowly before just to wait for Lugger. Now that she found that he could run faster, Tia naturally increased her speed. Both of them increased their speed, and with Tia leading the way in front, the two finally ran out before being surrounded by the ghost. But Tia, who ran out of the fungal blanket, did not slow down and continued to run forward. Ruger was now concentrating most of his energy on running, and did not notice that the ground under his feet had changed from that elastic state back to hard. He also ran for a while after Tia. Tia slowed down slowly until the two ran over a hill and said, "Okay, Brother Lu, we should be almost there. Do you want to kill some ghosts to replenish your alchemical materials? But be careful, it's best not to damage the fungal blanket. We just cut it once and stole some seeds before, so the threat is not that big. If you attack the fungal blanket directly, it is likely to attract all the patrolling ghosts around." Ruger stopped with Tia, breathing heavily. After listening to her, he raised his head and was about to speak, and saw a group of patrol bees flying densely in the sky not far away. He hurriedly grabbed Tia, who was setting up a grenade launcher and preparing to fire, and turned around and ran to the other side. "No, the patrol ghosts have been summoned." "Huh? No, why? Why did they react so quickly this time? It should be fine." Tia was shocked and ran while fiddling with the cat head on her shoulder. "Hey, is your memory correct? Why is it different from what you said?" I don't know either. Old Noisy looked innocent, maybe their patrols have also evolved. Well, Tia, from 20 years ago to now, no one has come to your rogue town again, Ruger asked. What about their experience? What have they encountered? Oh, this. Tia was hesitating, and Lao Ke said first, those people are so arrogant, they didn't say anything. What, Ruger thought, is it possible? Things related to the life and death of the entire town can be kept secret? No, Tia hurriedly came out to explain, their experience was collected by special people in the town, but it was kept secret from the outside. Those people. I see, the Nephilim supremacists also regard this information as their own power and block it from the outside, right? Ruger instantly understood the whole story. Humph, these guys, if they continue like this, they will not be far from death themselves. Ruger's words were not simply venting. With the state of the ghosts in this underground city, it is hard to say when they will counterattack the ground. At that time, the Nephilims who keep the secrets and don't disclose them to the outside world may live a little better than ordinary people, but they will inevitably die in the end. If the skin is gone, where will the hair be attached? Although they think they are the skin and ordinary humans are the hair attached to them. After hearing what he said, although Tia did not speak, it can be seen from her expression that she also thinks that those guys are destroying themselves. Especially after this expedition, after the limited memory of the Old Noisy was verified, it can be clearly found that the crisis is approaching step by step. Tia secretly clenched her fists and swore in her heart that she must think of a way. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Infinite Doomsday Start draws Luodu mechanic. Author, Shanmao Aichiji. Chapter 53. Each of them had their own thoughts, running forward while dodging the pursuers in the sky. No one noticed that the road under their feet was no longer the familiar road they had come from before. When they were awakened by a series of strange rumbling and clattering sounds, they realized that they had lost their way. But neither of them cared about how to find the way, but climbed up a hill beside the road, avoiding patrol bees, and crawled into the cracks in the ground to look at the location where the rumbling sound came from. There are not many things that can make rumbling and clattering sounds, and there are even fewer in this strange nest. The most likely one is a strange biochemical beast with lost weapons on its body, similar to the previous machine gun crab and fire spider. Sure enough, the two looked in the direction of the sound and soon saw the appearance of the person who made the sound. The machine gun crabs that made the clattering sound were not only the previous machine gun crabs, but also the large caterpillars with machine guns on their heads. Those caterpillars were much smaller than the machine gun crabs, perhaps less than 1 meter thick, but 5 meters long. It only has a machine gun in its mouth, but the caliber is probably above 7 millimeters. The 7 mm caliber M2 Browning heavy machine gun of the US Army is nicknamed Matus by the soldiers. Translated into Chinese, it probably means the same as Laogan Ma, so M2 is often called Laogan Ma in the Chinese context. So, those things are Laogan Ma caterpillars? It sounds delicious. The firepower of these Laogan Ma caterpillars is much stronger than the light machine gun of the machine gun crab, but their own defense is low, so most of them hide on the flanks. And their caterpillar bodies can easily control the large recoil of the heavy machine gun while keeping the area facing the enemy to a minimum. After all, caterpillars have a small cross-section. And the rumbling sound came from the large grasshoppers. The heads of these things, and even most of their bodies, have been transformed into artillery. It is a relatively old-fashioned towed cannon. And the calibers seem to be large and small. But it seems that most of them are between 50 mm, 75 mm, and 88 mm. Probably corresponding to Pak 38, Pak 40, Pak 43, and other old World War II guns. I don't know whether the ghost only dug up these old guns, or the grasshopper ghost's body strength can only use them reluctantly. Anyway, looking at those grasshoppers from a distance, it is better to say that they have a gun on the grasshopper's body than to say that grasshopper legs have grown on the gun body. But if you look more closely, you will find that those guns are really mounted on the grasshopper's back. The 3 pairs of insect legs of the large grasshopper can effectively control the recoil of the gun. After a shot is fired, these things actually push out a new shell from the abdomen, and push the shell into the barrel of the gun as if mating under the push of the tail organ to complete the automatic loading. It's really the same as a male grasshopper lying on a female grasshopper and filling her with something. Looking at these ghosts of different forms and types using different weapons, Ruger suddenly found that they seemed to be quite particular. What weapons were installed on the insects of different forms and structures after modification, or were they carefully designed? PAK series is the abbreviation of the German Panzerabwehrkanone, which means anti-tank gun. But perhaps because of the enemy type, these ghosts did not fire solid armor-piercing shells, but blooming grenades. In this case, instead of calling them anti-tank guns or anti-tank guns, it is better to call them grasshopper cannons. Just as Ruger used the mechanic's perspective to refer to and study these advanced design concepts, Tia next to him suddenly patted him. "Brother Lou, look at them on the other side." "On the other side? Aren't the ghosts divided into 2 teams practicing fighting?" Ruger hurried over. "My goodness, there is no other team of ghosts on the other side of the ghosts. Those guys who were covered in dust by machine guns and artillery, but still staggered forward in the hail of bullets, weren't they the zombies that Ruger was most familiar with? Sure enough, there are zombies at the end of every apocalypse. There are zombies in the world of the lost. No, wait, that's not right." Ruger took a closer look and found that although the zombies were slightly different in color, their appearance were all the same as the dark zombies on the ground. It's just that the zombies at the edge of the forest when he met Tia seemed to be red in the withered yellow. And these guys, I don't know if they are too cold or what, are dark gray with green. It's as if their blood has been poisoned into corpse poison green. But, the monsters on the opposite side are not only these dark green zombies, but also teams of skeletons with withered yellow bones. Unlike the unarmed zombies who only use claws, these skeletons actually hold rusty iron knives in one hand and broken wooden shields in the other, forming a formation to cover each other and charge in the artillery fire. Well, machine guns and cannons roared, and the flames and fragments were the same color. Is this actually a century-long duel between hot weapons and cold weapons? It's just that the hot weapons are various insects, while the cold weapons are the undead skeletons. No, not just skeletons. From time to time, some red-skinned dwarfs flashed in the monster group. After being shot by machine guns, these red dwarfs will stand up again soon. At the same time, fireballs are thrown from time to time in the monster camp and fly into the ghost array. This is the fallen demon and the fallen magician. And from the tolerance of those red-skinned dwarf fallen demons to bullets, it can be seen that they are not ordinary fallen demons, at least nightmare difficulty. What's going on? Could it be that the ghost will lure out the nightmare monsters in the evil cave, lead them to the core nest dungeon deep in the maze, and then send heavy troops to kill them? Is it planning to clear out the monsters guarding it in the evil cave bit by bit like cutting sausages? But the monsters seem to have their own way of replenishing themselves, and it is not realistic to want to clear the cave by cutting sausages. Moreover, there don't seem to be dark green zombies and skeleton warriors in the evil cave, right? Where did they come from? However, these guys are much weaker than the fallen demons. But they are obviously stronger than ordinary fallen demons. So, relying on the number that is not inferior to the ghost, these guys are rapidly approaching the enemy under the artillery fire. Although more than half of the men were lost along the way, when the 2 front lines began to contact, it seemed that the outcome was decided. The meat shield machine gun crab in the front row, although it can withstand a fireball spell head-on, was quickly bitten into the gap between the shells under the attack of a large number of skeleton zombies. Soon, it was hit in the nerve center and fell down with a bang. Without the protection of the machine gun crab, the lack of flexibility of the Laugan maw caterpillars on the flank was immediately exposed. Even if they kept spraying bullets in front of their heads, the long and fleshy body was too big a target, and the opponent only needed to swing the weapon casually without worrying about missing. After a while, these guys could only fall to the ground sadly. The grasshopper cannons were smart. After noticing something was wrong, they immediately jumped back. The firepower of those who were already at the back did not decrease at all. Regardless of the fact that the monsters had already rushed to the caterpillar crabs, the grasshoppers still bombarded them wildly. Ruger took a quick look and was afraid that a small half of the ghosts who did not have time to escape were killed by their own artillery fire. Infinite Doomsday Start draws Luodu mechanic. Author, Shanmao Aichiji. Chapter 54. Soon, the front row of ghosts were completely destroyed by the double attack of monsters and friendly forces. The monster army was bombed by grasshopper cannons, and more than half of them were reduced again. When they charged to the rear of the enemy again, the retreating grasshopper cannons had joined the artillery again and poured grenades in their stomachs at them. It's so beautiful. Google searched can. Ruger could imagine without looking that when Xiaotaya said this, her eyes must be shining with little stars and her face was full of excitement. Sometimes Ruger still wondered if Xiaotaya's love for fire explosions was more intense than his love for system points. But he shook his head soon. How could that be possible? Obviously. Xiaotaya's love is stronger. How could he compare with her? As the two watched with their own thoughts, the situation on the battlefield continued to change. The bombing of the grasshopper cannon was very fierce, but without the front-line ghosts, the monster army charged faster. Similar to the killing mechanism of the grenade launcher ammunition that Ruger gave to Xiaoxia, the grenades used by the grasshopper cannons also rely on high explosives to empower a large number of fragments to hurt the enemy. Grenade, unlike the transliteration of cannon, uses a literal translation. It refers to a blooming bomb with many seeds in the belly like a pomegranate. This kind of ammunition will explode separately after being launched into the target area, and the blast wave will scatter the fragments to the surrounding area. So the closer you are to the center of the explosion, the more fragments you will be hit by, and the greater the damage you will suffer. Of course, if you are too close to the center of the explosion, you will also be killed by the shock wave of the explosion itself. It's just that the explosive charge of the medium caliber grenade is limited. Unless you are near the center of the explosion, the shockwave damage a little further away can be ignored. Under this kind of grenade bombardment, although the dark green zombies have a good defense, they are often hit directly because of their slow speed and are quickly beaten into sieves, which is a heavy loss. But compared to them, the sword and shield skeletons are simply the other extreme. These guys without flesh and blood are highly resistant to attacks such as shockwaves. However, their bodies are just skeletons with countless gaps. A grenade sends out countless fragments. At least half of them will hit the target when they hit the zombies, but 2/3 of them will directly pass through the gaps when they hit the skeletons. The remaining fragments hit the skeletons, and if they are lucky, they will break the joints, but if they are unlucky, they will just sweep out some ashes. Only those fragments that hit the soul ghost fire in their skulls along the skull eye holes can really cause fatal injuries. But these sword and shield skeletons still hold shields. Although the broken wooden shield has limited defense, it can easily block some scattered fragments that are not at the center of the explosion with the blessing of the magic power of the dark world. When an 88mm grenade attacks ordinary human soldiers, the effective killing radius is about 10 meters. With one shot, an area of nearly 300 square meters will hardly leave any survivors. But when it hits the sword and shield skeleton formation, the effective killing radius is not even 10 meters. The skeletons will not fall down 2 meters away from the explosion center. The 88 cannon with the largest caliber is still like this, and the performance of those with smaller calibers will be even worse. The grasshopper cannon formation only fired 3 or 4 rounds, and the group of sword and shield skeletons that rushed to the front had already caught up with them again. This time, without the obstruction of the machine gun crabs that barely had some melee ability, the grasshopper cannons with 3 pairs of legs under the gun body were chopped by the sword and shield skeletons and soon lost their combat power. Simple long-range heavy fire power, after losing the protection of teammates in front, was hit by the enemy in front. It was so fragile, helpless, and monotonous. Ah, it's not fair. Hurry up and open up the distance, and shoot him. Watching the excitement is not a big deal. Tia, who put herself in the artillery side, couldn't help but make a noise. Fortunately, the sound of artillery on the battlefield was much louder than her subconscious voice. Especially those grasshoppers whose legs were cut off and unable to move, once again showed the spirit of breaking jade, and detonated the grenades in their stomachs that had not been fired in time. For a while, violent explosions on the field came one after another, and the huge sound waves covered the entire field, and other sounds could not be heard at all. The previous wired walkie-talkie was convenient to use in the car due to its structure, but it was too cumbersome when getting off the car, so neither of them used it. The wireless walkie-talkie would interfere with the shadow links, so it was useless. In addition, Ruger had been wearing noise-canceling headphones, so even though he was right next to Tia, he could only vaguely hear her shouting. It looks like the winner is about to be decided. After making a gesture to Tia not to shout loudly, Ruger looked at the situation on the field and whispered in the girl's ear. In fact, Tia reacted after she subconsciously shouted, and couldn't help but cover her mouth with both hands in a guilty conscience. After hearing what Ruger said, she just nodded quietly, with both hands still firmly clasped over her mouth. She just looked at the grasshopper cannon array that was chopped to pieces with a pair of big eyes, and the regret and helplessness in her eyes could not be stopped. However, just when the two thought that it would not take long for the monsters to clear out the ghosts, a group of ghosts suddenly flew over from the horizon not far away. Most of them were patrol bees that the two were already very familiar with. The weapons of these bee ghosts are also the stingers on their tails. Those crossbow-like bee stings are ejected by the abdominal cavity pressure. Although the kinetic energy is not high, the bee stings themselves have effects such as toxic paralysis. But just like the fragments were powerless against skeletons, these paralyzing stingers that were extremely useful against living creatures were really useless against skeletons. Fortunately, they seemed to know that they were useless against skeletons, so they basically rushed towards the zombies and fallen demons. As for the other half of the flying ghosts, although the two had never fought, they had seen them from a distance more than once before. It was a group of green giant mantises as big as wild horses. These guys were not flying fast at high altitudes, especially compared to patrol bees. But after landing on the ground, with the blessing of the leg bounce, they burst into the skeleton group at an extremely fast speed. The two sets of steel knife-like forelimbs slashed at the skeleton group, chopping the opposite side into a pile of broken parts like chopping melons and vegetables. Oh my God, it turned out to be them. When Ruger recovered the fragments of the Special Battalion's armed vehicles before, he was curious about how the smooth cuts on their bodies came from. How could he not react when he saw these steel knife mantises? Compared to the other ghosts he had encountered before, these two-handed steel knives and extremely explosive knife mantises can definitely be called advanced soldiers. Based on their combat effectiveness, if he had planned it intentionally or not, Luger had no confidence that he could survive. However, it seems that because of their high level, their number is not large. Luger counted them one by one, and there were exactly 12 knife mantises on the battlefield. But there were only these 12, slashing and flying in the group of skeletons, and a big battle came to an end. Infinite Doomsday Start draws Luodu Mechanic. Author, Shanmao Aichiji. Chapter 55. This Is it over? Looking at the empty battlefield, the two people hiding in the cracks of the hill looked at each other in bewilderment. Google search reading. Just a few minutes ago, the two people's final prediction of the war was that the monsters would win the battle against the ghosts at the cost of losing 90% of their troops. The best result for the ghosts would probably be that the grasshoppers would die together with the monster army by the final self-explosion. But no one expected that the ghosts would turn the tables with only 12 steel-blade mantises and dozens of patrol bees. At this point, I hope readers will remember our domain name Taiwan Novel Network Rightward Arrow. Well, it can't be said to be a comeback. After all, the army composed of machine gun crabs, machine gun caterpillars, and grasshopper cannons was indeed completely wiped out. Those grasshopper cannons that had not yet been chopped up by the sea of skeletons also died under the slashing of the mantises. The ghosts really had no concept of friendly fire, as expected of a biochemical beast based on insects. It was similar to the nature of the various insect races. After killing the front row of skeletons, the mantises flew back to the back row of monsters, harvested the sporadic quasi-nightmare monsters controlled by patrol bees, and then flew back in the direction they came from. After confirming that there were no more surviving monsters on the field, the patrol bees immediately split into two teams. One team cleaned the battlefield, and the other team flew to the direction of the fungal blanket that Lugger and the others had left before. After watching for a while, Tia couldn't help but exclaimed again. "Huh? Brother Lou, did you see that? They seem to be recovering the weapons of the lost ones from the corpses of the ghost." Yaruger nodded immediately after hearing this. It seems that they can't produce weapons of the lost ones, or the output is very limited. That's good news. Because this shows that the ghost's heavy firepower will definitely not be too much. Although it will probably not be too little. If it was too little, the ghosts would never install the self-destruct function on the grasshopper cannon. Although their self-destruction will explode the grenade in the abdomen, the gun barrel carried on the body will definitely be damaged. If the heavy firepower is less than a certain level, they will never design it this way, even if only some old guns from World War II are destroyed. The most reasonable explanation is that the ghost's heavy firepower is limited, especially modern firepower. But the number of old weapons from World War II will not be too small, so they can afford the loss. Just look at the patrol bees cleaning the battlefield. They are obviously more careful when recovering the light machine guns on the machine gun crabs. When they recovered the Laogan Ma machine guns and the old cannons from World War II, they were much rougher. These old antiques were thick, strong, and durable. The accuracy might have been okay back then, but it was not so good after becoming antiques. Even if they were fine, they were useless. On the contrary, the new light weapons from the Cold War on the machine gun crabs could still have good accuracy if they were well maintained. Just as the two were pointing at the two sets of standards of the patrol bees that had flown away before flew back. They were holding pieces of purple-red meat-like things on their legs. It was exactly, fungal blankets. Fungal blankets? What the hell? Ruger was wondering when he saw the patrol bees flying over the monster corpses and throwing down pieces of fungal blankets. After the fungal blankets fell on the monster corpses, they were like Tia being thrown on a large piece of barbecue, and they immediately feasted on it. It was said to be feasting, but in fact, it was differentiating countless hyphae and growing into the flesh and blood along the wounds of the corpses. While the hyphae were absorbing the flesh and blood of the monsters, more purple-red flesh pieces grew along the edge of the fungal blanket. Before long, the fungal blanket that was only the size of a palm really grew into a carpet. What's more terrifying is that these fungal blankets are not only able to absorb the flesh and blood of the fallen demon corpses. They also eat the rotten and poisonous corpses of the dark green zombies. They even did not let go of the skeletons. Even the ghostly corpses were quickly sucked up by them. This. Looking at the magical and weird scene in front of him, Ruger was deeply shocked and could not recover for a long time. He finally knew how the fungal blanket grew. That's not right. Isn't it said that fungal blankets actually grow by absorbing solar energy for photosynthesis? Moreover, looking at the location of the previous fungal blanket, it happened to be the intersection center of the halo of several nearby pillars. It shouldn't be just a coincidence, right? Besides, do the fresh seeds in Rogue Town also grow on the corpses of monsters? What is this? It's okay for the Nephilims, but do ordinary humans also survive by eating the corpses of monsters? Seeing him turn around and want to talk, but he was stunned for some reason, Tia couldn't help but blink her big eyes. Brother Lu, what do you want to ask? After hearing this, Ruger hesitated for a few times, but still asked the question. Oh, you ask how we grow food seeds? Well, it's almost the same as them. Tia pointed to the patrol bee that was rolling up the grown fungus blanket bit by bit. It's really true? While Ruger was surprised, an uncontrollable feeling of nausea kept rising. What, Brother Lu, how can you jump to the food chain? Tia, who probably guessed what Ruger was thinking, pouted with both anger and amusement. Hey, how can eating fungus blanket be considered eating monsters? When we were able to grow crops, we also fertilized them so that they could grow well. According to your idea, are we eating fertilizer? In Lugger's era, chemical fertilizers, that is, inorganic fertilizers, were used. In the Middle Ages of Xiaotia and her friends, only organic fertilizers, that is, natural fertilizers, were used. That is, the kind of fertilizers used by humans and animals. After hearing what Tia said, Lugger's nausea not only did not subside, but it showed signs of becoming more serious. Imagine following Xiaotia's words and converting the steamed buns on the table into fertilizers and then stuffing them into your mouth. You let him vomit for a while first. No matter what he said, he controlled himself to recover from those evil thoughts and finally breathed a sigh of relief. Although Tia's words made him think too disgustingly at first, he calmed down and thought about it again, and it did make sense. The food chain is something that can't be calculated casually. But putting aside those trivial things, it seems that the food chain of monster corpse mushroom human still has some problems. Could it be that the fungal blanket can decompose the magic energy in the monster corpse and grow bigger? Or can they eliminate the toxins in the monster corpse, turning the poisonous monsters that cannot be used by humans into food? Let's talk about the latter first. The answer is no. After hearing Ruger's new question, Tia immediately explained. Moreover, the fungal blanket not only cannot decompose the toxins in the monster corpse, but will also be stimulated by it and quickly enter the toxic maturity stage. So, when we fertilize the fungal blanket, we also try to remove the toxins from the monster corpse in advance. Tia paused and continued, as for the first question, we just feed the monster as fertilizer. Generally speaking, we only fertilize once when we plant fresh seeds. This allows the seeds to take root and sprout quickly. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Infinite Doomsday Start draws Luodu mechanic. Author, Shanmao Aichiji. Chapter 56. We hadn't talked about related topics before, so Ruger hadn't noticed it. Taiwan Novel Network rightward arrow dot. Now, it seems that when talking about seeds, Tia is also very interested and talkative. If Ruger hadn't stopped her, she would have taken out the seeds she had snatched and demonstrated them to him on the spot. She even prepared the fertilizer, which was the bee leg meat that Ruger had prepared for her and put in the fresh keeping box as a snack. However, as Tia took out the seeds, the task of helping Tia complete the seed transfer in Ruger's system panel actually showed signs of completion. Task 2, Target, help the alchemist Tia Max complete the food seed transfer reward, 600 points. It seems that as long as Ruger helps Tia get the seeds and makes them germinate successfully, it doesn't necessarily have to be planted in Rogue Town, and the task will be considered completed. That's a full 600 points. Even if converted into attribute enhancement potions, it is a full 6 attribute points. Seeing this task item flickering there, it seems that it can be completed at any time, and Ruger's heart is beating wildly. He was afraid that if Tia insisted, he would really help her to plant the seeds on the spot. But in that case, a food seed that is precious to human survivors would be wasted meaninglessly. What's more, what if there is a special connection between the fungal blanket and the ghost? Insects communicate with each other through pheromone-like chemicals. It's okay to have obstacles to isolate them at a long distance, but now it's so close that it's afraid that the ghost will be attracted in minutes. Although the ghosts nearby are only those patrol bees that are not very dangerous to Ruger and his friends, Ruger still thinks that it's best to have the initiative to start a war in his own hands. After calming down the eager Tia, Ruger turned his head to look at the patrol bees above the battlefield, intending to find an opportunity to escape as soon as possible. As a result, the strange bees picked up the fungal mats that had grown several times larger than the ground and flew away. It seemed that after using the fungal mats to decompose and absorb the nutrients of the corpse, they would transport the fungal mats back to the fungal mats where the larvae were raised. This time, Ruger didn't need to ask, Tia had already explained it to him. Although fertilizers can grow anywhere, when there is no fertilizer, fungal mats grow fastest in places with light and water. Not to mention water sources near this battlefield, even the light is relatively dim, which is not suitable for the natural growth of fungal mats. It is reasonable for the patrol bees to transport those bulk mats away. Ruger nodded after listening, but did not continue to ask questions under Tia's eyes. Ask me if you have any questions. Instead, he patted Tia's shoulder and said without looking back, since most of the patrol bees have flown away, let's just go and buy some goods. As soon as he finished speaking, he jumped out of the crack in the ground and ran straight to the pile of guns and cannons that were picked out and recycled. Well, restocking. Tia instantly understood Ruger's plan, and her big eyes immediately turned to the cannons, flashing with stars again. Brother Lu, wait for me, I want some too. The patrol bees are not weak, and their combat power is not bad. Whether they are a transport team or a patrol team, they are quite competent. If they face other enemies, even other Nephilim, even if they can't beat them, they can at least escape and report the news. But when they meet Ruger and Tia, these patrol bees are in trouble. The two first pretended to be rookies who fell into a trap, attracting a small number of patrol bees to fly over and prepare to capture them alive. When they saw that the distance was about the same, the two unscrupulous people drew their shotguns and fired a string of buckshot at the patrol bees within a dozen meters. This round was not to kill the enemy, but to break their wings so that they could not escape. Caught off guard by the original prey that suddenly showed its fangs, the first batch of patrol bees collapsed to the ground, but they were not in danger of life. In this case, the other patrolling bees would most likely not run away and call for help, but would try to gather around to help. So the two repeated their old tricks, and another group of residual bees fell to the ground. At this point, even if the remaining ghosts found something wrong and were ready to run away, they would not be able to hold out for long under the guns of the two people who had freed their hands. In addition, Ruger also had an HK-417 automatic rifle that could be used as a precision marksman rifle to fire at those at a slightly longer distance. It didn't take long before there were no more flying bees in this area. After reloading the residual winged bees that fell to the ground and were still trying to attack the two ran to the pile of guns and cannons. After picking and choosing for a long time, Tia picked up a 6-meter-long 88-gun barrel and was about to stuff it into her small bag. Ruger hurriedly stopped her and pointed to the breech block at the end of the opposite side of the muzzle, indicating that there was no muzzle as small as the muzzle there, and forcing it in would only break the mouth of the bag. Tia reluctantly went over to compare the size, and confirmed that her small bag was really not wide enough to fit the cannon, and she couldn't help but feel a little disappointed. But the next moment, she blinked her big eyes, walked to the center of the cannon barrel, and with a little effort, lifted it up like a barbell and carried it on her shoulder. You don't want to carry it back to Rogue Town like this, do you? Ruger said in surprise. How could that be? I'm not stupid. Ty wrinkled her playful little nose. Don't we still have the chariot? Just carry it there. The heroine is so calculating. Ruger was deeply shocked by Ty's high IQ. He wanted to ask her, how did she make sure that the chariot could carry this cannon weighing at least 3 tons? Ruger himself was not sure whether the V8 could still run with a load of nearly 6 tons. However, looking at Tia, who looked happy and satisfied while carrying a barrel of more than 3 tons, Ruger opened his mouth several times but could not say anything. At this time, he really regretted not telling Tia about his logistics space before. Just when Tia was picking and choosing from the pile of guns, trying to find a good-looking cannon, Ruger had already secretly used the logistics space to recover a batch of guns and cannons. Like this 88mm caliber cannon, he recovered at least 3. In other words, Tia didn't have to carry it herself. But now, seeing Tia jumping out, Ruger really had a lot to say. In addition, there were still weapons on the ground that had not been recovered. These guns and cannons, even if they were just recycled as raw materials to the logistics space, could help him save a considerable amount of points. Not to mention that some of them could be used directly after a little repair. The 88mm gun weighing more than 3 tons is a bit too heavy for the Honey Badger tank, but the 50mm caliber small gun only weighs 1 ton including the gun mount, and the gun barrel is only about 600 kilograms. The Honey Badger can definitely carry this thing. It is the kind of carrying that is directly installed on the roof and used as a vehicle-mounted gun. A real gun feels definitely better than a grenade launcher. Thinking of this, he didn't care that Tia was getting farther and farther away, and he put another batch of guns and cannons into the space. Little Tia walked out for a long time without hearing Lugger following her, so she turned around and prepared to call him to follow. However, when she really shouted, the sentence became Luge, run. Because the patrol bees that flew away with the bulk carpet blocks before came back again. With them came 3 steel blade mantises. Infinite Doomsday Start draws Luodu Mechanic. Author, Shanmao Aichiji. Chapter 57. Steel Blade Mantis. It is more than 2 meters tall and about 5 meters long. When the dorsal wings are fully extended, the wingspan is more than 6 meters. To be frank, except for its slightly slender body, it is larger than Ruger's small tank. The forelimbs of ordinary mantises can be roughly divided into 3 sections, corresponding to the upper arm, forearm, and hand of humans. The difference is that the forearm of mantises is generally longer and thicker than the upper arm connected to the body. Remember the domain name of the site Taiwan Novel Network rightward arrow dot. And this part often has hard serrations, which can easily hunt food with the slender and sharp hands like hooks. The steel blade mantis is based on the mantis, and its structure is basically the same. However, from the forearm to the hand, the forelimbs of nearly 2 meters in total have all been replaced with steel blades. Moreover, from their record of being able to easily cut off the shield and blade skeleton with a slight swing, it can be seen that the steel is quite extraordinary. The most ridiculous thing is that ordinary mantises are typical insects, with a pair of blade arm forelimbs plus 2 pairs of supporting legs, exactly 3 pairs of legs. However, although the steel blade mantis also has 2 pairs of supporting legs, it has an extra pair of forelimbs. In other words, a mantis has 4 steel blade forelimbs that can be folded like a guillotine. Each set of steel blade forelimbs consists of a serrated blade forearm and a sharp scimitar hand, a total of 8 steel blades. Coupled with the burst speed provided by the high-frequency flapping of 2 pairs of membranous wings, a steel blade mantis is at least equivalent to 4 elite scimitar light cavalry. Ruger, who was happily collecting guns and cannons over there, heard Tia's warning and looked back, and saw 3 steel-blade mantises rushing towards him. In his eyes, it was nothing but a 3-headed mantis, but a mighty army. Okay, it's a bit exaggerated to say a mighty army, but it's at least half an armored cavalry platoon, right? If the mantis is regarded as a special armored vehicle. In short, someone who was just happily taking the spoils into the space, suddenly saw such a horrifying scene, and he was almost fuming. It wasn't the heat rising, but the soul was gushing out of his 7 orifices. Now, he didn't care about the weapons that hadn't been recovered yet, and ran towards Tia. Not to mention, the speed was quite fast, much faster than his historical record of the 100-meter race. It's a pity that even if it broke his own historical record, it was only a little more than 8 meters per second. The speed of the steel blade mantis flying over there was not supersonic, but at least a few points faster than ordinary arrows. No matter how you look at it, it won't be less than 60 meters per second. Moreover, Ruger had seen how they harvested the sword and shield skeletons, and knew that their current speed was at most cruising, not their limit at all. If this continued, Ruger would be chopped into dozens of pieces by the steel blade mantis behind him before he could even reach Tia, not to mention how far he could escape. Tia, cover with fire. He shouted to the front. Ah! This. Tia had also thought about covering him, but she was a little confused about how to do it. The only weapons she could use were 2 shotguns and a grenade launcher, except for cold weapons. The effective range of the long-barreled pump-action shotgun was 50 to 80 meters, which was obviously not suitable for dealing with the mantis that was still hundreds of meters away. The long-barreled shotgun was not good, let alone the short-barreled one. The high-speed grenade launcher had enough range, but the grenades in her hand were all impact detonating fuses. In other words, the ammunition had to hit the target or fall to the ground to explode. The dual-purpose lethal armor-piercing bullet is indeed very useful against machine gun crabs and fire spiders, but it is mainly because those 2 kinds of ghosts are on the ground. Ghosts crawling on the ground have a limit no matter how fast they are, and it is absolutely rare to exceed the speed limit. 120 km per hour, converted to only 33 meters per second. At this speed, it is naturally impossible to avoid high-speed grenades that can reach 240 meters per second. But it is just like once a person runs, it is not easy to be shot by a bow and arrow. The flying speed of an arrow is 5 or even 8 times the running speed of a person. The flying speed of a high-speed grenade is even only 4 times the flying speed of a mantis. In a nutshell, Tia really has no confidence in using a grenade launcher to hit a flying steel blade mantis. Not to mention, if something goes wrong, a grenade falls to the ground and accidentally explodes Ruger. Because of this, Tia is really entangled in how to cover. But now that Ruger had spoken directly, she couldn't just not act. After thinking about it, she simply ran towards Ruger, swinging the 88 gun barrel on her shoulder. A 1.75 meter tall loli with a sturdy and well-proportioned figure rushed straight towards her, waving a 6 meter long, 3-ton stick in her hand. This scene, even though Ruger was knowledgeable, was almost petrified. What is this for? In ancient times, anti-aircraft guns were used to hit mosquitoes, and now there are cannons to beat mantises. But people use cannonballs to hit mosquitoes, and Lady Tia's cannon only uses the tube itself to beat mantises. Brother Lou, get down. Just when Ruger was full of complaints and didn't know where to start, Tia, who was running in front of him, yelled first. This is his good character, not being hypocritical at critical moments. After hearing what Tia said, he didn't think twice and immediately took advantage of the momentum to lean forward. He fell onto the gravel ground and slid forward. Even though he was wearing a thick enough heavy armor, he could feel the burning pain in his arms that were supporting his chest. But soon he didn't care about it anymore, and turned his head to look behind him. As a result, he saw a giant mantis rushing forward, with its blade spread out, about to swing at his back, being swung away by Tia's 88 cannon stick. Snap! After a crisp collision, the guy flew to the horizon at a speed several times faster than when he came. Home run! Ruger stared at the mantis that was hit and almost shouted. "Brother Lou, don't stand there, help!" While shouting, Tia raised the cannon barrel and swung it at the two steel-blade mantises in the back row again. However, after seeing their little leader being swung away by that weird giant iron stick, the two mantises behind them no longer dared to be arrogant. While continuing to fly forward, they both started to accelerate. It was the same speed burst used when harvesting the sword and shield skeletons before. In an instant, the two mantises that were about to be swung away by Tia again had dodged the attacking gun barrels. At the same time, the 4 sets of knife arms fired at full power. Swish clang! The 88 gun barrel in Tia's hand had been cut into several pieces. "Ah! My gun!" Seeing that the gun she had carefully selected for a long time was dismembered, Tia was immediately angry. She looked forward with one hand, pulled out the 3 barrels on her leg, and with one hand, pulled out the pump behind her, and at the same time grabbed 2 shotguns in her hands, and fired a round of rapid fire at the sky. Bang 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 bang. 3-1 buckshot was fired, immediately blocking the surrounding airspace. The steel blade mantis has high attack and high speed, but its defense is a bit poor. Although the 2 pairs of membranous wings are much harder than those of ordinary mantises, they will be dented by a large piece even if they are not broken after being hit by a steel ball weighing several hundred joules. Infinite Doomsday Start draws Luodu mechanic. Author, Shanmao Aichiji. Chapter 58. What would happen if the wings of an airplane flying at high speed were hit with dents and gaps? The aerodynamic shape is destroyed, resulting in turbulent airflow, which can easily cause instability and imbalance if you are not careful. Although it won't disintegrate on the spot, if you want to land alive on the ground, it depends more or less on luck. Although the flight principle of insects relying on the flapping of membrane wings is not exactly the same as that of artificial aircraft, there is no difference in that wings are the main structure that provides lift. Taiwan Novel Network Rightward Arrow. The flying posture of the steel blade mantises will be affected somewhat after being hit by deer bullet steel balls on their membrane wings. Their flying speed naturally slowed down. Over there, Tia emptied the 3-barreled shotgun, immediately freed up her hand to load the pump action, and shot out the remaining 5 rounds in the magazine. It's a pity that although the 870 DM has a fast rate of fire, it is not as fast as 2 guns firing at the same time. Although Tia still hit mantis, the threat to them was far less than before. Tia shouted while changing the magazine, "Ruger, help quickly." At this time, Lugger, who was lying on the ground, had already drawn his gun and aimed it upward. With Tia's experience, he understood that the power of the shotgun could only create some obstacles for the mantises, but it was unable to penetrate their chitin armor. So, he directly copied the 762 caliber HK-417, which had not been opened much. While Tia was fighting with Mantis, he was already aiming intently behind the holographic sight. When Tia called for help, he was still concentrating on aiming, holding his breath and not answering. Just when Tia was changing the magazine and was about to be hit by the steel blade of a mantis, bang, a gun rang out on his side. A 762 caliber armor-piercing bullet quickly passed through the muzzle and directly hit the mantis in the neck. "Pretty." Tia couldn't help but exclaimed. She picked up the loaded shotgun with her backhand and hit the last mantis with bang bang bang. Lugger was actually a little confused. His shot originally hit Mantis's arm, and it was to save Tia. But he didn't expect that Mantis would speed up again and send its neck in front of the bullet. The kinetic energy of the 762 caliber armor-piercing bullet is several times higher than that of a shotgun bullet, and its storage speed is better. This shot actually broke the mantis' thin neck. However, judging from the time when the system kill record popped up, This shot did not actually directly kill the mantis. The guy fell to the ground and broke his neck. In an instant, only one of the 3 mantis hunters was left. The hunter becomes the hunted. Although Tia's shotgun kept firing, the mantis had already begun to retreat and no longer attacked, but instead waited for an opportunity to escape. At this time, the patrol bees behind saw that the situation was not good and began to fire stingers from a distance to cover the mantis's retreat. Tia was very unhappy with these guys who damaged her 88mm cannon. When she saw it escaping, she wanted to keep it and kill them all. After discovering that the shotgun was not easy to use, she simply pulled the rapid grenade launcher on the gun mount behind her forward and fired randomly at the mysterious figure in the air. Seeing her like this, Lugger quickly changed from lying down to lying down, raised his gun and joined in the pursuit. However, their luck seemed to have run out. They took out a few strings of bullets and hit a lot of patrol bees, but they still let the mantis run away. "Brother Lu, help me, I want to kill it." Tia looked at the guy running away in front of her with hatred and yelled. Before Luge could speak, the Shadow Lynx Lao Noisy shouted first. "Retreat quickly, their reinforcements are coming." The two of them took a look in the direction it pointed out, and they saw that there were more than a dozen steel-blade mantises charging toward them menacingly. It seemed that these guys had regarded them as small prey that had accidentally fallen into the trap. After being beaten and disabled, I found out that they were tough, so I immediately changed my attitude. They actually sent a whole team of mantises to deal with them. Run! Run! No matter how unwilling she was, Tia instantly reached an agreement with Lugger, put away the guy and turned around and ran away with him. Lugger threw some small cans out as he ran. Puff puff puff. Gray smoke spread from it, accompanied by some pungent smell. It is an improved smoke bomb, similar to peppercorn tear gas. The two people who quickly cast their shadow cloaks fled the scene under the cover of thick smoke. In this brief conflict, the two of them generally took advantage. Mainly because Lugger collected the half-space guns. But Xiaodi Ya's side was miserable. The carefully selected 88mm cannon was chopped into scrap metal, and her little face was almost wrinkled into a bitter melon. Luge wanted to comfort her, but she forced herself to pretend to listen to his comfort, which was not only funny but also heartbreaking. After much deliberation, Luge decided not to persuade her, and took little Tia and ran toward the edge of the underground space. Then, while Tia was distracted, he went out for a spin, and then drove the small chariot back. "Huh? Are you back here already?" Tia said with some emotion. Luge thought to himself, how is it possible? This place is probably not at least a few kilometers away from the place where the chariot was stored before. After a lot of running around, and with nothing to navigate in the underground space, the two of them had long since lost their way. "I really want to run back to where I came from, but it won't be possible within a few hours." Lugger just found a deserted place to drive the small tank out of the space. In response to Tia's question, Lugger just said that he had done some tricks on the tank, so he could find it back. But it was impossible to run back to the tunnel entrance along the way he came. Tia just nodded indifferently after hearing this. She didn't really care about how to get out. On the contrary, the only thing in her big eyes was the new cannon on the top of the small tank. "Brother Lu, what is that?" She swept away her previous depression and asked excitedly. "Why do I feel that it is different from the previous cannons?" Of course it is different, Lugger thought. All the previous cannons were old cannons from World War II. Not to mention how backward the shells used were in terms of explosive structure specifications, the cannon itself made the user quite worried. What recoil is too large, accuracy is not enough, gunpowder smell is too strong, leaks, etc. That is to say, in the World War where people are also a kind of consumables, no one would find faults. But for his own use, Ruger didn't want to be shaken by the recoil and choked by the smell of gunpowder in the carriage. During the time he was out strolling, he ran back to the logistics space to make another gun with the collected materials. 88mm caliber mortar howitzer. In general, this gun is a compromise product made by using the technical root of the 120mm caliber howitzer and the barrel of the 88mm gun. Ruger didn't want to make the 120 gun directly. But the system price of the barrel is too high. He can only use the 88mm gun as a discount coupon to buy a mortar howitzer barrel of the same caliber. And there are no ready-made shells, so he has to make them himself. And this kind of mortar howitzer can fire rapidly and continuously, and the consumption of ammunition is quite high. Although this gun is installed now, it only makes Tia happy. In fact, there are not many shells, and it is basically unusable. Simply put, it is still a prototype for now. Alas, it is also difficult for Luger. It is already amazing that he can make the cannon in such a short time, so where is the time to do other things? Fortunately, his hard work was not in vain. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Infinite Doomsday Start draws Luodu mechanic. Author, Shanmao Aichiji. Chapter 59. After seeing the cannon, Tia changed her previous depression and ran over, touching and looking here and there, almost drooling. Ruger was relieved when he saw this, and hurried over to help her introduce the principles of each mechanism and the operation method of this cannon. Taiwan Novel Network Rightward Arrow. At the same time, he also said that there were not many shells and it was temporarily impossible to test fire live ammunition. What live ammunition test firing? Tia waved her hand. Wouldn't it lead the enemy back? Alas, you are right to think so. Ruger was very relieved. So far, although the two have escaped the pursuit of the ghost, they are still lost and can't find a way out for the time being. Fortunately, Ruger has enough water and food, and Tia has enough toys. Both of them have a bright future. That's right. Tia's hearty voice sounded from a simple field workshop. Across the workbench was Ruger, who was making freezing bullets with sapphires. With enough food, fresh water, and seeds, the two simply dug a workshop on the spot and rested. With a large amount of materials recovered from Guimei, Ruger wanted to take this opportunity to give the two a comprehensive change of clothes. And Tia returned the favor and kept the previous agreement to teach him how to make attribute ammunition. After learning, his task was automatically completed, and he could also buy various magic gems in the logistics space. It was the price. Ruger decided not to touch it easily. In fact, the so-called attribute ammunition is not profound at all. The most technical content is how to use the alchemy array to guide the magic energy in various gems. With the superpower of telekinesis, this part is not easy for Ruger, but it is definitely not difficult. Except that the consumption is a little bit higher. Ruger also found that although they are both telekinetic abilities, his focus is not completely the same as Tia's. He found that telekinesis in his hand was like having an extra powerful arm or arm. Although he could also complete very delicate work, his use was rather rigid and stiff, not flexible enough. Just like a mechanical arm, an engineering robot. Tia was more flexible, and she could even use telekinesis to feed several threads into the needle hole at the same time. In contrast, its power was not very great, not even as strong as Tia's own arm. With such characteristics, Tia could quickly complete some very complex alchemy by herself. For example, this kind of attribute ammunition. The time it took Luger to make one attribute shell was enough for Tia to make 4 or 5. Fortunately, Luger was not disappointed. Every man has his own strengths and weaknesses, and based on his own characteristics, he has begun to design some special equipment. But that still requires time. In the previous series of battles, many shortcomings of the two were exposed. Luger's defensive ability, the close combat ability of the two, and the anti-air ability all had certain problems. Anti-air ability is the easiest to say. The machine gun in Lugger's hand can be used as an anti-aircraft machine gun with a slight modification. Tia's grenade launcher can also launch timed grenades. As for melee ability, it is basically the same as defense. If there is a tank, melee and defense are not a problem with the tank armor and blade armor. But after getting off the car, so he improved these two aspects based on the state when walking under the car. Speaking of improvement, in addition to making a new set of armor for each of them, Lugger also practiced some melee skills with Tia. Of course, it is difficult to hit people with fists and feet, just practice the close-range shooting method of drawing a gun. It is considered a simple entry-level gunfighting technique. But Tia is much happier. With her previous ability to run around on the battlefield with a 3-ton gun barrel, Lugger made 2 large scimitars for her using the steel-blade mantis corpse as material. It can still be switched from a short-handled knife to a long-handled one. Next time when there is a need, Tia can grab 2 long-handled machetes and play a windmill whirring. Not to mention how strong it is, at least it looks very scary. As for armor, Tia's armor does not overemphasize protection, but takes into account athletic ability. In addition, there is the ability to mount external weapons. For example, the gun racks for high-speed grenades and shotgun racks are all installed on this set of armor. Let's put it this way, except for the lack of built-in power, this set of armor with exoskeleton and deck is just like power armor. In comparison, the armor that Ruger gave himself is much more complicated. Tia is physically strong and only needs an exoskeleton. But with Ruger's strength attribute, if he wants to wear armor with high protective power, he must rely on external force. But if a power device is added, and the thickness of the armor is guaranteed, the volume of the armor will be particularly bloated. In addition, forcibly wearing such a thick armor will cause his mobility to drop rapidly, and it will be easier for the enemy to use him as a live target. Between protection and mobility, he finally chose the latter. In the end, his new armor was roughly the same as the previous heavy armor suit with bulletproof inserts. It was just some special reinforcements in key parts. Some protective arrays were made with magic gems. Other abilities may be lacking, but it would be difficult for things like lasers, lightning, poison gas, and fire to penetrate his protective suit. In addition, he did not completely give up defense. It was not good to wear a heavy armor directly, so he could find a huge shield and put it in the space. Design a shooting hole on it, and when encountering an enemy, pull out the shield and poke it on the ground. He can put the gun behind him and output with peace of mind. For mobility, wheels were installed under the shield. Ding ding ding. He reinvented the wheeled bulletproof shield. In general, the two gained a lot from this rest. When they set out again, they didn't even want to leave. However, according to the time, it had been 2 days since the two entered the evil cave. In addition, the two had actually lost their way, and it was unknown how long it would take to return to the ground. The seeds stored in the special jars were indeed not afraid of deterioration for a while, but they were afraid of more troubles after a long night. So after making all the main equipment and eating and drinking enough and resting well, the two officially left. This time Lugger did not leave the chariot behind. The problem of excessive engine noise has been greatly alleviated by installing sound insulation materials and components such as shock absorption and noise reduction. Of course, it is impossible to completely mute it, but it is not as noisy as before, and it is not so loud that it can be heard several kilometers away. In addition, in order to facilitate running away, he also installed smoke bombs on the small tank like a real main battle tank. Smoke bombs are not the same as smoke bombs. The smoke of the former is more persistent, and some special things are installed inside that can even interfere with infrared or electromagnetic waves. With this thing, the next time they are chased by high-level ghosts, the two cannot say that they can escape directly in the smoke, but at least they can buy more time to choose the best counter-attack method. The current goal of the two is to find a way out as soon as possible. So unlike the previous method of finding a small hill to climb up and look for, Ruger walked as close to the edge of the underground space as possible. Infinite Doomsday Start draws Luodu Mechanic. Author, Shanmao Aichiji. Chapter 60. However, due to the limitations of the terrain, there are always some places that cannot be passed and need to go around. If the intersection ahead is blocked by the ghost, you have to go around. During this period, there were also battles between ghosts and monsters similar to the previous one. However, the scale was not as large as the previous one, and the ghost had an overwhelming advantage. So the two did not dare to take advantage and took a small road to go around. After just a few times, the two found that it seemed that such small-scale conflicts seemed to be more and more frequent. The two were wondering when they suddenly heard the shouts of humans from the small battlefield ahead. After listening twice, Tia seemed to recognize the voice of the speaker. That seems to be Minerva, Luigi, let's go and take a look. Minerva, in the language of the Dark World, probably sounds like this. However, this is the name of the god in Roman mythology corresponding to the Greek mythology goddess Athena. It is hard to say that it is just a coincidence that the humans in the Dark World gave this name. The Minerva mentioned by Tia is the only female among his three teammates, a barbarian female warrior holding a double-axe halberd. Barbarians are typical warriors in the Dark World. Their attributes are strength and physique. Most adult barbarian warriors are strong and tall, like a Terminator who just came down from a bodybuilding competition. Even Minerva, who is a woman, is like this. She is at least 1.9 meters tall, with well-developed muscles and broad shoulders. She swings her two-handed axe and halberd with great power, and no one can get close to her easily. Human tank is the term prepared for her. Hearing Tia call out his name, Ruger was a little surprised. He thought what kind of powerful lineup the ghost side sent out to leave such a human tank on the battlefield. Ruger himself felt that not only the ordinary small insect ghosts that appeared before, but also the giant mantis that almost made him capsize before should not be her opponent. It was not until he got closer and saw the situation on the field clearly that he suddenly realized. It turned out that the barbarian female warrior was not fighting against the ghost army alone. There were 7 or 8 agile female warriors around him who used bows, arrows, javelins, scimitars and other weapons. She could have beaten the ghosts to the ground by herself, so why was she trapped after a group of female warriors? That was because these female warriors didn't care about the ghosts outside at all, but fought with her. Fallen Rogue. After seeing their appearance clearly, Tia immediately called out their names. That's right. These were not warriors from the Nephilim side at all. They were clearly fallen people who were corroded by the magic power of hell. In other words, they were monsters from hell. Their prototypes were the mercenaries in the first act of Diablo, the rogue warriors. These fallen rogues were not simply invaded by magic power, but were first transformed into undead and then demonized. Their skin was blue, and a considerable part of their skin was rotten, revealing the flesh underneath, which was particularly hideous. On the top of their disheveled heads under the tattered helmets, there were also demonized horns. With the dual attributes of undead demonization, these fallen rogues are not only extremely powerful, but also feel no pain and never get tired. Although their individual combat power is far inferior to that of the barbarian female warrior, the cooperation of multiple people still puts a lot of pressure on her. If it were just them, Minerva would be able to clean them up even if she spent some effort and time. However, the ghosts on the periphery, who were supposed to be hostile to the monsters, had no intention of protecting the enemy's enemy at all, and they wantonly wielded their various attacks on Minerva. They were all the ones with debuff effects that Ruger and the others had seen before, such as acid, poison, lightning beams, and the like. Although a considerable part of them hit the fallen rogues, those guys themselves had no sense of pain and were tireless, so these debuffs had extremely limited effects on them. Although the female warrior had a high resistance to them, she would inevitably be affected after being hit continuously. Whenever she blocked many attacks of the fallen rogues and seized the opportunity to prepare for counterattack, those poisonous lightning would pass through the fallen rogue formation and hit her. She was affected and slowed down by half a beat, so the fallen rogue she was targeting took the opportunity to escape. This was quite reasonable. Because once she turned from defense to offense, it meant that the fallen rogues were hit by her and the middle gate was wide open, which also left a larger gap for the back row attack. Then, naturally, more debuff attacks from the ghosts would hit Minerva. In this way, the three parties interfered with each other and fought a stalemate. However, everyone knew that the longer the stalemate in the ghosts' base camp, the greater the chance of the ghosts winning. In just a moment, Ruger saw 3 Patrol B reinforcements appearing around. He was not the only one who found that there were more and more ghosts, and Tia also saw it. "Brother Ruger, let's go!" Little Tia shouted, set up the grenade launcher behind her and bombed the ghosts on the periphery. This time she used the fragmentation bombs she made. The range of each explosion was 2 points larger than Ruger's version. But after 5 or 6 shots, a huge hole was torn in the ghost array that surrounded Minerva. Ruger also stepped on the accelerator and drove the chariot out. While running towards the gap in the ghost group, he controlled the machine gun on the front of the car to fire at the fallen rogues who were fighting with the female warriors. 2 726 caliber general-purpose machine guns were mounted on the mechanical arm remote control racks on both sides of the vehicle. Under Ruger's operation, they swung left and right and fired at will. Even if the fallen rogue had no sense of pain, he would still be injured and killed by a full-power rifle bullet. After several rounds of attacks, not only the fallen rogue, but also the monster group was greatly reduced. Looking at the system's kill records and the points he gained, Ruger barely controlled his joy and asked Tia with pretended concern. "Tia, is this okay? Will your friend be injured by the machine gun?" "Well, about being injured, well, he won't die anyway," Tia said vaguely. "I knew it would be like this." Ruger sighed in his heart and rubbed his head helplessly. "It's okay to say that shooting at her. She has strong defense and is not afraid of being accidentally injured. Then why don't you use bombs to bomb that side yourself?" "Well, you are risking me to offend people, right? This little girl Tia is sometimes quite smart." Although he was muttering in his heart, looking at the female warrior wielding a 2-handed axe and halberd with high spirits, Ruger knew that Tia was not lying. A few stray bullets from full-power rifles would not cause much damage to her. It was nothing, just like a bee sting. Being stung by this thing would only hurt for a while. So he continued to bang 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 at the rogues without hesitation. The ammunition box on each remote control chassis was filled with 200 rounds of ammunition, enough for him to squander for a while. But in fact, halfway through the fight, those fallen rogues saw that the situation was not good and began to flee in all directions. But they didn't know that this would only bring their doomsday earlier. Because the grenades on Tia's side were also thrown at them who were far away from the female warriors. Boom boom. Tia's flame explosion fragments reappeared.